Welcome to 10 Minutes for Democracy. Today I want to talk about the Movement for a People's Party. I released a video back in late August, early September about the Movement for a People's Party, right after their virtual 2020 convention, which you can still find information out on their website, actually. Had a lot of great guests. That's actually where I first found out about the organization, although it apparently had existed for several years before that. Now, if you didn't know, the People's Party is a third party, kind of like the Greens that are trying, the Green Party, and they're trying to create an alternative to the kind of the power duopoly in terms of political parties we have with the Democratic and Republican parties. So in this video, I want to talk about, so I saw a video on Rising where they were interviewing ex-volunteer who saw the same convention that I saw and was so inspired by it that they decided to actually get involved, and they kind of discuss and brief their experience with it. I'll link that video so you can watch the whole thing in the description, and as well as the website for the Movement for People's Party and some other stuff. So the Rising, with their now temporary co-host, they've been replaced again, interviewed this ex-volunteer. There's some interesting thoughts. It kind of got me diving into what's going on with the People's Party and learned some interesting information. So I wanted to come on stream, share it with you. I actually originally was going to make this a standalone video pre-recorded, but that's an interesting backstory to that, and I'll go into that at the end of the video. Anyway, now that we're going, this is different because I don't have an interlude to jump to. They welcome the 10 Minutes of Democracy. I'm just going to go right into it. So, a little backstory. So, Rising is a show, YouTube channel that you've probably seen. If you're watching me, you've probably seen it. And I used to have hosts that were Crystal Ball and this guy named Sagar, whose last name I don't remember. And they decided to go out on their own. They built that show as far as a web. It's backed by The Hill, which is a Washington kind of based media outlet with conservative owners. And but they were kind of billed as kind of two sides, the progressive left and the progressive right, talking about issues of concern to them. So they left, and they were replaced. They left at their own behest to start their own thing called Breakpoints. And they were then now The Hill could have stopped the show, but instead they tried to replace it. So they brought in Ryan Grimm, who's in my opinion, well-respected reporter from The Intercept, and a woman named, whatever her name is, it's Emily Jakowski. And they were there for a few weeks. It wasn't clear if they were the permanent hosts or temporary hosts, but they were gone. They got two other people now that are, to me, unimpressive, and I actually unsubscribed. But they, anyway, while Ryan Grimm was there, and they were both interviewing her, but it seemed like more of his get, and he was the lead interviewer on it. They interviewed a woman named Renee Johnson, who either Johnson or Johnston, I'm not sure which one. I think it was Johnson, and she was a former volunteer from the great state of New York who watched, as I said, that convention back last August and was so inspired by it, which is understandable. I mean, progressive ideas like Medicare for all and restorative justice and a lot of things they're talking about and that are in their kind of intermediate platform. And I'll get to that in a minute too. And anyway, their intermediate platform, they drew a lot of progressive attention. They had the likes of Cornel West and Jesse Ventura and Danny Glover and Chris Hedges and a bunch of, kind of generally populist or left or kind of like social libertarian people that are fairly famous that were at that convention. Anyway, she was inspired to do it. So she goes and she starts getting involved with them. She starts going to meetings. She wants to build the hub, kind of like I think a state affiliate or at least a city affiliate for New York, where she is. So they interview her, and she had a couple general critiques, and just briefly running through them. One was that the organization wasn't particularly organized. They were not living. That was the first one. In terms of, I'll go into details in a minute. Two, they weren't particularly well. They didn't. How do I put this? They build themselves as very grassroots, very democratically run, unlike the other parties, which are run by money and very hierarchical. They were trying to make a very flat, horizontal structure to the least amount of hierarchy as possible. That's what they were trying to build. And then lastly, trying to be inclusive to different cultures and ethnicities. And so, and not being particularly sensitive to, in the case of Renee Johnson, who's a Black woman, Black issues and some issues that Black members of the Movement for People's Party were having. So, what do I want to go to next? So, I kind of jumped around my outline a little bit with that introduction. So let me go here. So, as far as the first issue of hers, which was not being particularly well organized, she first cited a general issue, which I, being grassroots myself to some extent, I faced certainly or seen, which is that you start getting people are excited to get involved. The alternative to the Democrats and Republicans, the Green Party kind of doesn't have any cachet at this point, so it's a new possibility of building something new for the people, progressive politics, blah blah blah. She gets a lot of people and they don't really know what to do with her and with the people that they have. And it's a lot of them looking to them for direction. They apparently she wrote a letter to them, asked for. Now, there was a particular issue as well. So it's generally, first was they don't know what they want us to do. Okay. But there's a second issue, which is in New York, apparently to get ballot or maintain ballot access, you have to run a gubernatorial or a gubernatorial campaign or gubernatorial candidate or candidate for governor. And she didn't. So she and the people she was working with asking them, like, do we have a plan for this, right? Because that's a big undertaking, running a gubernatorial candidate. And the National Movement for People's Party didn't have a particular plan for that and kind of said, don't worry about that right now. So that was disappointing to her because ballot access is very important to a fledgling, third party. Third parties are one of the challenges in our society. Having a third party is oftentimes the rules of state government make it very difficult to build and maintain a third party in terms of getting on and staying on the ballot and being able to run your candidates at all. Some states it's relatively easy, other ones it's fairly difficult. And New York sounds like it's more on the difficult side, not being an expert myself. And I hit my mic, of course. So, that was kind of a follow-up there. Now, before I jump to talking about some of the race issues that came up, let me talk a little bit more about kind of running candidates in general. Because at this point, they're interviewing her. Ryan Grimm says, hey, they've been around since 2017, which wasn't exactly fair of him to say because the party itself was only kicked off in August of 2020. The Movement for People's Party was Nick Brana, who started it up and is kind of one of the figurehead of it. Started up with his father and some other people back in 2017 or thereabouts. And they've been working on building up to this. So it really isn't fair of saying they haven't run anybody in 4 years. Really, they couldn't run anybody until now. But he asked her about that and she agrees, yes, they haven't run any candidates, but they are looking at trying to run people for 2022. And that seems reasonable. You couldn't run it in 2020. You only have 2 months. The primaries already passed by. So that was the soonest the People's Party could run anybody. So I thought that was a little bit of a cheap shot by Ryan Grimm, who apparently, from some other stuff I read, isn't particularly keen on third parties. He's I think a respected journalist, but he is clearly on the left side of the spectrum of politics. So, but going back to the issue of race, so two things kind of came up related to that over the course of the conversation with Renee. One was that there was people, the Movement for People's Party has a Slack, and in their Slack, you can talk about various issues, communicate. It's a more dynamic way of talking rather than something like email. Something where it's almost in real time. It's like a chat board in a sense. I was on one for some campaigns I've been involved in. You can talk about, I made this many calls, and et cetera, and people can cheer you on, et cetera, et cetera. So she gets on the call with, so anyway, they're on Slack, and she apparently wasn't involved herself, but witnessed or knew about it and read the Slack itself. But some white members of the People's Party, and I'm going to use that kind of interchangeably with the Movement for People's Party, because even though the party was theoretically started, the website's still called Movement for People's Party. I think that's the entity that's actually incorporated. So the party itself, I think this apparently, based on what I've learned, isn't really finalized in terms of structure and all the committees it's going to have to be an official political party. So I might say the People's Party or the movement, but it's all one and the same. Anyway, so on their Slack, there is this contentious argument between some white members of the People's Party and some black members. And one or more of the white members of the People's Party involved in this chat believe that they should have a pass to say the N-word because they're sympathetic to the concerns of African Americans. Of course, the black people did not agree, which is totally expected. And there was a contentious debate between this. And now that might happen. You might have arguments. Such things happen. And contentious probably means there may have been curse words. There may have been some pretty harsh things said back and forth. And understandably, that's, the N-word is a trigger word for African Americans. So if you start talking about that kind of stuff, you can elicit some strong reactions. Anyway, but what happened is apparently the next day, a whole bunch of those black members of the People's Party who were on the Slack were kicked out of the organization, not just off the Slack, but instead they were not welcome in the organization or sent a memo or something. Only one white member of that conversation was treated that way. And that, of course, doesn't seem equitable. And at this point, Ryan Grimm chimed in and said that he had seen the Slack himself and could co-sign that it didn't take place. And indeed, it's probably important that he said that because when I was looking online after this, kind of looking at information I could find about what happened from other sources, apparently Nick's father, who's like the finance manager for the People's Party, he tried to make a straw man and say that, oh, nobody said the N-word on Slack. But nobody said the N-word on the Slack. They said they were talking about having a pass for saying it, which is still bad, even though it's not the word itself. But they're trying to use a straw man rather than address the actual issue. But it seems like the party didn't necessarily handle that too well. Now, I want to circle back on something because I forgot about something. At one point, going back to the issue of organization, early on, I think after August, but probably before this whole kerfuffle about the Slack and the N-word, there was a reorg at the national level of the People's Party. And Renee was not happy that the grassroots and the kind of rank and file that she was part of in the organization didn't have a say in it, and it was almost kind of told to them after the fact. Now, I don't know if that's entirely fair from the sense that when you're an organization like that and you suddenly become very popular, money starts rolling in, you may have to very quickly try to adjust the situation. However, if you look at what they're talking about in terms of their ideals, in terms of being transparent, in terms of being not as hierarchical as other political parties, I think you could both say that her critique is valid, if understandable. She also said that their finances weren't particularly transparent, although to me, I'll say I think that we have to wait until the 2020 information comes out, because at that point, I think the money starts rolling in, you get a better idea of whether or not something funny is going on with it. Her critique was that the old information from 2018 and 2019, you have to go to the IRS and kind of get the official information about it. And it's under a different, she didn't say this in the thing, but I found out later, the company is incorporated under a DBA or kind of a official way of saying also known as. So you can't find the records for Movement for People's Party in the IRS. You have to, some organization, some corporation out of Michigan with a different name called like People for Democracy or something, but it's a different name. So it's kind of hard to find. And so as I said, I think it's a fair critique, but to me, honestly, at the end of the day, what are they doing with the money? The answer to that question, I think, matters a lot more about how easily it is to acquire that information. Though again, that critique is, I think, valid. So that wasn't the only issue. So that expelled a bunch of people, and some of those people went on to do something else and come back around to the People's Party with a petition with some issues they had. But before I get to that, so Renee at this point, as I understand it, was still in the Movement for People's Party, and she was involved in the kind of a black outreach caucus or something to that effect. And so while she's doing that, they have this opportunity they were trying to, or planning to reach out to Sean Combs, P. Diddy's political organization. He created to start endorsing candidates and or to try to get their endorsement of the party, of the People's Party, and or their actual candidates once they start fielding them. Now, the concern of that particular black outreach entity caucus inside of the People's Party was that they didn't have a final platform yet. They had the intermediate one, the one that if you go to the People's Party website, they have a platform there, but at the top it says, this is, just temporary. We actually vote on one at our first kind of founding convention, or how they refer to it, their convention in late 2021, which is yet to come. So they don't really have a platform at this point. Now they're always soliciting candidates. They already have a lot of people. So hopefully whatever that platform is, it's very similar to the one they put up there. But their concern was that, well, that's, if we have that platform and it has a Black agenda to it, aspect to it, but that part doesn't make it in there, then there could be, then it might harm the relationship. So better to come in once you have that platform. But Nick Brana and the leadership didn't agree, told him to set it up anyway, and he would show up there with some other national person and they would kind of take it from there, which for organizations supposed to be very horizontal, again, rubbed Renee and some of the other Black members of the People's Party the wrong way. Now, at this point, I think I should mention that, or I should say that Ryan Grimm made a point during the conversation to with Renee to suggest that the People's Party was trying to kind of, like Rising, interestingly enough, bring together the left populace and the right populace. Now, when people say that, usually what they mean is a certain type of class reductionism. That is to say, let's make all the issues about class so that we can bring together the masses of people on all sides. But usually oftentimes, if you're not careful, you end up doing a class reduction that kind of ignores issues of race and gender. And in our society, you can't really do that. That's going to alienate people. And so he brings that up, suggests kind of this type of potential kind of class reductionism, and this idea of reaching out both to the far left and the far right. And Renee tended to agree with him and said she had concerns with the People's Party and they're reaching out to far right wingers. So her as a Black woman, and obviously that'd be her concern. And indeed, so when it comes to this platform, if they don't have the right platform, if they have this platform they have to vote on, and they're trying to appeal to a whole bunch of people that are on the far right on economic grounds, then they may not want to be in favor of restorative justice and reparations is something that Renee in particular spoke of, or just generally programs to help Black people. Indeed, one of the primary ways of Republicans getting people to vote for them over the last 40 years is implied, if not outright stated, that we should cut welfare because it helps Black people. So the idea of being able to get people who are on the right wing to be involved in a populist organization that doesn't ignore racial issues seems difficult to believe. So that was something that, going to the convention and just kind of keeping one eye on the People's Party, I wouldn't necessarily pick up on. From somebody from the inside, though, is going to see who they're reaching out to, where they may be being more flexible about what the platform is actually going to be. So that's a big thing to keep an eye on once they have this convention later this year, is what's that platform going to be? Is it going to include all the aspects, probably kind of intersectional aspects of it that have to do with gender and race and other types of issues related to ethnicity? Because one of the main ways that a lot of people on the right have been radicalized is by disinformation from the mainstream media, and specifically the right-wing mainstream media like Fox News, about the way that racial issues. And so trying to get them to come around to those, to be involved in this, was supposed to be an ostensibly progressive organization, could be difficult. And they could end up with a platform different from the one we see on their website. So that's something to really keep an eye on. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, kind of the big reveal that I got from this that was separate from the kind of what Renee talked about in that Rising article, is that a group of current and former volunteers who now are kind of somewhat negatively referred to by some people in favor of the People's Party, like Jimmy Dore, as the Petitioners, although they're sometimes also referred to as bad faith actors and other derogatory things, is that they actually wrote up and submitted a petition to the Movement for People's Party, expressing their concerns, including the ones I've listed here. And one other one is there are no actual formal bylaws yet for the People's Party. Those again are going to get set up and finalized as part of that convention later this year in 2021. So one of their concerns is you don't really have full bylaws. Isn't there? There are aspects of the organization that seem kind of done by dictate rather than through true democratic organization. And a lot of their answers were, and this is the one thing about the website, which is Petitioners MPP .org. Let me verify that. Hold on a second. I wrote it down. See, I wasn't planning on doing this as a stream. Oh, where is it? Of all these post-its. Yeah, petitionmpp.com. It is my mic. It is .com. So you can go there. You can see their initial letter. You can also see what they say were the responses, because there was and they actually have a narrative of what happened. This all happened around December, January timeframe. A lot of this, people being kicked out and this petition being taken place, and the negotiation between the petitioners, not negotiation, but like a discussion, mediated discussion between the petitioners and the Movement for People's Party, and and basically this is their version of what the People's Party kind of said were their positions on their concerns. Like 8 or 9 different things, a bunch of different things. It covers a lot of kind of what I talked about here and more. But it goes to the structure of the People's Party and it truly being democratically run and administered as much as possible for a political party. And one thing that the People's Party did say is that at some level you have to have committees, and there's a certain hierarchical structure required by political parties. And so for that reason, so that's one of their kind of statements. But on the other hand, they haven't really finalized the structure of the party. So this is all TBD, which again, for someone, this has been almost, by the time of this convention, you would have had a year of people kind of wondering, what are we supposed to be doing? What are we doing? They're calling for candidates now, in spring of 2021, but they don't even have a platform yet for sure. So there could be candidates that come aboard, but then the platform doesn't match them, and then it becomes like the Democratic and Republican Party, where the platform doesn't match the candidates. So they can say, take AOC, for example, calls herself a Democratic Socialist. She's a member of, I think, the New York Democratic Socialists, but she doesn't do the stuff that they tell her to do necessarily. And for example, that whole force to vote thing was a concept or a strategy that was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists, but AOC didn't want to do it for her reasons. So platform is only as good as the people that you get elected that go along with that platform. But they kind of have had this platform is what has gotten people to come in and sign up. And so if you're going to have that platform, it better not be too much different once this 2021 convention happens, or there could be all kind of chaos. So again, I'm going to link to the petition, mpp.com, the petitioners that have their kind of concerns about the People's Party, and discuss them with the Kenton Party. The party's linked down there too, and the link to the video with the now former temporary co-host of Rising, talking with Renee Johnson about her experience with the People's Party. So that's all going to be linked below, and I'm going to set that up, after the stream is over. But last thing I wanted to say, kind of about this, kind of in closing, is that I think it's too late to kind of write the obituary on the People's Party. I think what Nick Brown is trying to do is ambitious. I don't know if it's really possible. I think that there's some that have kind of said that this might be a whole big scam to make money. That's certainly still entirely possible at this point, because they don't have anything to really show for what they've done, aside for kind of the media facing stuff like having a convention with a bunch of famous people talking about how this is a good idea. So the proof's gonna be in the pudding. Do we have actual legitimate, real campaigns that get run for 2022 in strategic locations that are winnable for the People's Party? Because that's the key to this. Is from my standpoint, and the biggest disappointment I had watching the convention the virtual convention in 2020, and I may even go to the 2021 convention if it's feasible, because it'd be a very interesting experience. But the 2021 was when Nick Brown got on at the end and said that he wanted to run a presidential candidate in 2024. Because from my standpoint, it looks like the failure of a lot of third parties is trying to swing for the fences early, instead of building up candidates at the city and county and even state levels before, and building up a power and a representation in certain states and certain places. And another critique that I heard was that they're not doing a good job of setting up their state affiliates or their state hubs or what have you. And that's going to be critical for developing a presence in state government in various states. And those are much more winnable. Those are generally lower money, more winnable campaigns than federal elections, like the House of Representatives, but especially like the Senate, which is, 5, 10, 15, $20 million, or the presidency, which is usually hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. To aim for that first, it doesn't necessarily, it almost seems non-serious. I don't know if that was just his excitement in the moment, if they really still feel that way, but it does look to me on their website like they're trying to solicit for congressional representatives rather than city or state. But I didn't dive into it deeply. I hope that they're going for smaller ones because that's how you have to start. Building a political party takes a generation. It's not something you do in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. And I don't know if the people that are running this are really planning for that or are built for that, because that's what that takes. Now, in full disclosure, the person that Caitlin, last name I can't remember, who runs Move to Amend, is actually now on like their steering committee or is like involved in the People's Party. I actually made a point not to talk to her before making this video, but I am going to ask her some questions after this out of curiosity, kind of, because I'm sure she can't tell me anything on the record, because to see what she thinks of these concerns, because she is very sensitive and has been, I thought, done a better job than what Nick seemingly has as far as navigating this nonpartisan intersectional universe that we're in terms of the progressive side of the political spectrum. And that's one thing that the People's Party has to get better at navigating. What they've done so far seems to be pretty, heavy-handed, kind of tone deaf, and they have to do better than that if you're going to be, effective as a political organization. So I mean, that's kind of my take on this. I think that it's too soon to tell. But after almost a year, I was kind of hoping there would be more to be able to tell. And I was generally disappointed. You can please go watch the Rising video. It's very interesting. It's only 10 minutes long. She comes across very sincere, not as someone who's got some grievance or is trying to just throw shade. She actually seems like somebody who she's like a school counselor or something. She just wants to make a difference. She's not in politics. She's not like, this is not something she was planning on doing with her life. But it seemed like she wanted to really make a difference, which is what grassroots is about. It's about regular people that don't do this for their careers, try to come in and make a difference. But with all the money in politics, that can seem hard. And so the appeal of a People's Party, of a third party that really is responsive to people and is built by, for, and of people, like our society is supposed to be, is very appealing. So we'll see if we'll have to wait and see probably another 6 months to a year to see if this People's Party is really legit, and if they're really gonna, kind of make an imprint on the body politic. Now, as I said at the beginning, and there's like I said at the beginning, there's a little backstory to this whole stream. I was actually planning on I did record a video. I have my outline for my video over here. And it's kind of done in segments. I record a segment, stop, record another one. I was trying to do that as an approach to making videos. I used to write full scripts. It took a long time. Not an overhead. I've got a lot else going on in my life. So I'm trying to be more efficient in terms of creating these videos. So what I did was I tried to put up things out. Anyway, I filmed it, and I was not happy. It was a struggle. I'm going to have to practice it more if I'm going to do that. But it did not come off well. And I said, you know what? I think I'll be better off doing a stream and just talking. Indeed, I had one person in here. He or she listened through most of it. So I did a pretty good job of not blathering on too long. But I kind of wish that I had been able to make the video that way, because I think that could work pretty well if I could get that to work. But I was just so unhappy with how it went. I decided I was just going to go back and do this video this way. Now, one of my day ones that have been watching the stream for a while and the videos for a while, when I mentioned this last week, he hadn't heard about it. And so I wanted to make a particular point of making this video. I didn't want to miss out. So I said, you know what? I don't like what I recorded. I'm just going to hop on stream and just talk it out. And only one or two people came on the stream the entire time. But that's okay. I don't have a large audience, but I wanted to make this video. If only he saw it, then at least one person did. And next week, I'm going to try to come back and make a video that's more kind of getting to the roots of democracy. I've been trying to do kind of stories about issues like other political YouTubers have been. But I think I want to shift it a little bit. And then we'll see if something comes up. But shift it back to what seemed to work for my channel, which was more so focusing on explaining specific legislation or like legal decisions, or talking about like core concepts of politics. Like my Overton window video actually has done fairly well over time, and same with the filibuster one did okay. So talking about these kind of fundamental concepts. So I want to start talking a bit more about democracy and the structures of it and what it will take for us to have a democracy that works. So look for that kind of stuff. It may be a week or two. It'll take me some time to brainstorm it, come up with something. So I'm not sure if I'll have something for next week or not. I'll try to post something up a day ahead of time, either premiere or stream time, if I'm going to do that for the couple consistent stream watchers that come on. Excuse me. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is the end of the video. So some slides will be coming up somewhere. Like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and click on one of the slides below to continue watching 10 Minutes for Democracy. Have a good evening. It's 2 buttons.